Hello everyone, Pat Farabee here. This is kind of a moral support video. Uh, there's a YouTube user by the name of Freethinker1990, and she posted a video here tonight where she seems to be having a bit of trouble with, I guess the things that trouble all of us. You talk about a cousin of yours who's dealing with an abusive relationship. I mean, there's no other way of saying that. Whether or not the guy, physically abuses her isn't even relevant. That is an abusive relationship that you're describing. But my goal here is to help you. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to share some of my experiences so that you know that, you're not alone, and that there are people who understand. I had a friend, and she had a boyfriend who was not physically abusive, but he was the kind of guy who, as soon as she got off work, she had literally about 10 minutes to get home before her cell phone rang. That sort of a thing. She wasn't allowed to go anywhere without his permission. She wasn't allowed to talk to anybody that he didn't like. That kind of a jack off. Well, one memory that comes to mind is we were sitting around watching TV, and Stephen King's It came on. Now there's a scene in Stephen King's It where one of the characters, Beverly, who's got a partner, a business partner, and a boyfriend named Tom, I think his name is in the movie. They're in an office, and this secretary comes in and says, there's a phone call for you, Bev. And she says, okay, send it to my phone here. And he says, no, we're busy, just take it later. And she goes, no, it's okay, I'll take it. And he, very strictly says, no, take a number and call them back. And then as the secretary leaves, she there's this tense moment, and she gives him a kiss, and you can see the expression in her eyes that there's something a little odd there. And he says, oh, by the way, don't ever contradict me in front of her again. That kind of a jack off. And so I look over to my friend and I point at the screen and I say, does that look familiar? And she just kind of smirked a little bit, because she knew what I was getting at. Later on in the movie, Beverly gets another call to go out to help her friends in this situation. If you don't know the plot of Stephen King's It, I'm not going to waste time talking about it. But when this guy Tom figures out that it's some old boyfriend, as he calls it, calling her, he slaps her and throws her down and goes to get a belt and says, you haven't learned your lesson, little girl, and it's time for another lesson. And I look back over to my friend and I said, I point at the screen and I say, that's where you're headed. And she just looked at me and I said, I know, enough about your history of the type of men that you choose to know that they keep getting more and more restrictive. And whether or not the guy that you're with now will ever do that to you, that's where you're headed. I said, why would you choose that? Is that what you really, really want? And she looked at me and she said, I never really thought about it. I guess I just like strong men. And I was kind of taken aback by that. And I said, that's not a strong man. That's a weak man. If someone needs to put their hands on someone else to feel strong, then that means that there's something missing inside themselves, and they're weak. And at the end of the scene, as she's leaving, the guy calls her name and says, don't leave, don't you leave me, and calls her name and calls her name. And you can see in that scene, even though it's very poorly acted, that You know, the essence of a man like that is weakness. Um, so, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I've never understood what draws someone to a person like that. When I was 6 years old, I remember being woken up in the middle of the night by loud noises and screaming. And I went into the kitchen, and my mother had her body wedged into where two counters met in a corner. She was wedged as tight as she could possibly get in that corner, with a butcher knife in her hand. And on the floor laid my passed out stepfather, who had just gone to town on her face. And I remember asking her why, you know, I didn't understand why she would stay. What was the purpose in this? And she always would come back with the excuse that, you know, he was a kind man when he wasn't drunk, or he loved her, or she loved him. And I never really got it, and I never understood what I could say to convince a person like that they're in a bad relationship. And I guess what I'm trying to help you understand is it is not your fault. There's nothing really that you should feel guilty about. I know that you love your cousin. She's made a choice. She has decided to stay with whoever it is that she's with. And you can call her and try to talk her out of it and try to open her eyes as much as you want. But the person who really has to make that choice, that decision, is hers. So I don't want you to feel guilty at all anymore about her situation. And then, of course, you also talk about kids being cruel, and I understand. Believe me, I remember in gym class, the guys used to pick on me, and they used to throw a basketball over the lockers and hit me in the head with it while I was trying to change. And one day I just decided I had had enough. So I stood up. When the ball came down, I picked it up, I stood up, I went around the locker, I threw it at the biggest guy I could see, and I said, I'm done, don't do it again. And I went back and I sat back down. And of course the ball came back over. And so I got up, I went back around the locker, I grabbed the kid, by my left hand around his throat, pinned him up against the locker, and with my right hand cocked back, I was ready to turn his face into mush. And then I saw the fear in this guy's eyes. This guy who was so tough and so mean and so cruel just a moment ago was literally about to piss himself. And I think that's the point that I realized, that these guys weren't being cruel just to be cruel. They weren't cruel because they were horrible people. They were cruel because they were getting something out of it. There was something that they needed, that they were lacking, that they got out of doing what they were doing. And so I said, you don't get to turn me into you. And I let him go. And I walked away, and he never bothered me again. Because I knew that I didn't need whatever it was they were getting out of their behavior. Really, all I can say is, don't let them destroy you. Don't let them affect your understanding of who you are. Because you seem like someone who really has a good handle on who you are, on what you believe, and on what you want out of life. So fuck them. That's my take on it. So, you know, don't let them get to you. The more storms that you weather, the more stable your boat is as they say. So you know, I know it sucks as far as advice goes, but my only advice is to not let them get to you, because it's really up to you who gets to you and how deeply they affect you. So peace to you. Hopefully you can get through all these things that seem to be troubling you. You seem like a good kid. Seem like you have a good head on your shoulders. I wish you the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.